Hello, everybody. Frank Kenny here. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Facebook Live. We're going to be talking about maybe a massive shift in the way the world works, at least as far as it concerns capital campaigns and raising funds and things of that nature. I think this is a really big deal. And let's get self-introductions from our guests, and then we'll kind of jump into this. Rick, who are you?
Yeah, Frank, good to see you again. So my name is Rick Kiernan, one of the founding principals of Convergent Nonprofit Solutions. We primarily manage capital campaigns for chambers of commerce and economic development groups all over the country. That's probably about 2/3 of our business. The other 1/3 is working with more philanthropic organizations, humane societies, Boy Scouts, YMCAs, community colleges, homeless shelters, organizations like that. And good
Fantastic.
to be back on.
Well, thank you so much for bringing us this topic. The world has changed, God, in a lot of ways, a good way. Horton, mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Frank and Rick. Good to see you. Hi, I'm Horton Hobbs. I'm Vice President of Economic Development for the Chamber in Greater Springfield. That's Springfield, Ohio, situated right on I-70, right between Dayton and Columbus in Ohio, so Southwest Ohio. I've been with the organization a little over 9 years. It is my hometown, which I think does create kind of a unique niche, especially in this kind of conversation that we're going to have today. But I've generally spent my entire career in this community or in the surrounding communities, and been very active in ACCE and Institute for Organizational Management and a lot of professional organizations. Very excited about this topic today.
Thank you guys so much for making the time to do this. For those of you watching, I would just love to know what chamber you're with, where you're watching this from. And of course, if you have questions or anything, go ahead and put them in the comment area so that we can make sure that, because you're going to listen or hear some new things today. And so I want to make sure your questions get answered. Let's kind of jump into this. Horton, maybe you can kind of give a 30,000 foot overview of the situation here, and then we'll start unpacking it.
Great, thanks, Frank. Yeah, so we are a traditional chamber of commerce, but we're kind of a three-headed beast, if you will. We have a chamber of commerce, which is our traditional member dues and investor model, more member model. We have a Convention and Visitors Bureau, which is funded solely from bed tax, so local government funding. And then we have an economic development entity called the Community Improvement Corporation, which was created in 1970 as a public-private partnership between our city, our county, and our business community through our chamber. And so we haven't all three been together under one roof forever, but for the last 15, 16 years, we have been. And when I first started at the chamber back in 2012 to run the economic development piece, we did our first capital campaign. And quite frankly, I really didn't even know where the light switch was at my office before we started that campaign. So we trudged along for 3 or 4 years under funding.
Let me interrupt you real quick, because there's going to be some people watching this that two things. They don't know what a capital campaign is. So kind of explain that. And then I got another question for you.
Yeah, so a capital campaign in this case, it's not capital in terms of building a building, which is what you typically hear. In this case, it's funding for a program of work. So for us, it's for an economic and workforce development program of work. So that's the capital campaign, and it covers the programming and the administration of that program.
So it's a big pool of money that you're going to raise from people in your surrounding area to allow you to do big things.
That's correct. That's correct. And so for our case, we decided back in 2019 that we needed to do another campaign, a new campaign, because we had a lot of success, but really weren't funded for it. So we hired Convergent in this case to go out and talk to our investors. Yes.
Sorry, I keep interrupting you, but I want to make sure the audience kind of feels like they can understand your situation. There's a lot of Springfields in this country, and some of them are big communities. Yeah. You're Springfield, Ohio, did you say?
We are. So there's 35 Springfields in the U.S. We're the one that we think the only one that people should know.
How many members do you have? How many people live in your service area?
Yeah, so we have a chamber of about 800 members. We have a county, we cover a whole county, which is about 138,000 people. And we have a central city, Springfield, Ohio, which makes up about 62,000. We also have one other small city called the city of New Carlisle, which is about 5,000. All together, about 138,000 people.
All right. So what we're going to be talking about here today is not only applicable to people that live in urban centers or major metro cities. I mean, it's a respectable sized city, but every state has a bunch of communities in similar circumstances here. All right, so right. I just want to set the scene here that we're not going to be talking here about a one-off that doesn't apply to me. I'm thinking your situation is going to apply to a lot of chambers.
I think it's very applicable to a lot of chambers of any size, really, but we are very rural. We're the 12th largest city in the state of Ohio, to give you some perspective. So we're not a huge city. We're not Cincinnati, Columbus, or Cleveland that everybody can resonate with. We're not as big as Dayton, which is our closest next tier down city. So we're in that tier 3 level community. And we are in a state that is very agriculturally based with a lot of urban areas. Our county is predominantly agriculture outside of the main city. So, yeah, I believe that what we'll talk about will resonate, certainly. And it did resonate when we went out and asked Convergent to interview our business community, the ones that have been actively involved, some more than others, some, frankly, just kind of on the fringe. We've got this program of work that we've done for the last 4 or 5 years that's done well. We think, based on past feedback, that we have an opportunity to do more if we had more to do. And so they went out and they asked about 60 or so businesses in the community and tested a $4 million program of work, approximately. It was about a $3.9 million program of work. And the overarching result was, yes, we think, and this is 2019, mind you, we believe there's an appetite to raise that kind of money, which would essentially be an annualized budget of about $800,000 a year, which would have been significantly more than what we were doing just to fund specifically workforce and economic development. And so we decided at the end of 2019 to start moving in that direction.
All right, so I'm going to keep interrupting you because I really want to make sure people understand this. So your community didn't just somebody didn't pull a number out of the air and decide we're going to raise all these millions of dollars. You had to test the market. Maybe Rick, you can talk about how this process works. If somebody's thinking about, wow, I wonder if our community could raise millions of dollars. Just think what you could do as a chamber if you had millions of dollars, or EDC or the tourism. What can you do? So, Rick, what's the process here? How complicated is it to even see if a chamber might want to move forward with something like this?
Yeah, Frank, it's a good question, and Horton's got a great description there of what we're talking about with a feasibility study. Yeah, it's one thing for a chamber to want to go out and raise $1 million, or $500,000, or $20 million, or $10 million. Pick your number. But will business leaders see value in what that campaign funds? If they do, will they write checks for what it funds? And it really comes down to that, right? So if you're going to go out there and times are tough and you want to run a capital campaign to shore up your budget, there's probably not a lot of value in that. If you are looking at economic development, job creation, capital investment, talent attraction, retention, development, livability issues, any number of I think initiatives that really resonate with businesses and identify what challenges they're experiencing. When you put together a plan that focuses on addressing those, and then we can take that plan and, to Horton's point, go out and interview about 50 to 60 business and community leaders throughout greater Springfield and get a sense from their perspective, what do they like about the plan? What do they dislike? What would they change? What do they think's missing? That right there, what you start to do is you start getting their fingerprints all over your program of work. What I like to say in the fundraising world, if they help you write your plan, they help you underwrite your plan. And our goal in a good feasibility study is a transference of ownership. So initially, this is Horton's plan. This is the chamber's plan. If we do our job right, by the end of the feasibility study, it's Greater Springfield's plan. And Horton and his team are charged with implementing that plan, and the community's charged with funding that plan.
Yeah. Horton, I'm just thinking here, so many people in the chamber industry kind of complain about the larger businesses in town that they're not involved with the chamber. They don't want to come to the networking events. They don't want to belong in any of the committees. I bet this changes the conversation with those big businesses. Can you talk to us about that a little bit?
It certainly does. And for us, what resonated the most and what continues to resonate are the challenges around workforce and workforce development. And so that levels the playing field, if you will. So when you start to have discussions relevant to what's keeping them up at night, it's not about a networking event. It's not about an engagement. Because heck, this thing right here, cell phones, really has changed the way we as organizations interact and as chambers interact. And so the value prop to them is, how do they help shape a plan, a program of work, if you will, where they see an active ability to engage at whatever level makes sense to them, with at the end of it or throughout the process, an opportunity to be actively involved in shaping the way the community moves. And for us, we had a strong workforce development program pre-pandemic, what we call concept audit back in 2019. So what we did in this interview process was really educate and challenge investors to think differently about their level of engagement, because we know it's going to take significant resources to move the needle. And more important for us, it's going to take more of a balance of public-private. So for us, we were funded economic development-wise about 60% public funded, 40% private funded. And as we all know, it's hard to move the needle against some of the established public entities when you don't have kind of the funding, the horsepower behind you. So what a capital campaign like this did for us, and I don't want to get too far ahead of the game, but it flipped the paradigm on us. So we're now 60% privately funded, 40% publicly funded. And that is very powerful, because that changes then the conversation, and it brings a different lens through which the public sector then looks at the efficacy of the work that we're doing, and legitimately bringing business to the table to help inform programs.
Rick, as the person that goes out there and works the phones and beats the street and raises this money and asks these questions, a lot of chambers, even having $1,000 membership level is kind of like, oh, our community doesn't have that kind of money. Some chambers have a 5,000, and other chambers are going like, oh, we could never have a 5,000. Some chambers have a 10,000, and most chambers don't have a 10,000. You get big checks out of these members. What do you think of that point, in that there's money to be made if it's the right program, if it's the right ask?
Well, there is, Frank, and it really comes down to having the right program and the right ask. The right program is exactly what Horton described there. It's building on a track record of success. And Horton and his team have provided value in the business community, so that when we were out there interviewing those Springfield business and community leaders, they overwhelmingly liked what they had been doing. But then Horton and his team, they were able to talk about what these big initiatives to address challenges in and around Springfield. So that's the first piece of it. But you can look at a Springfield, Ohio. You can look at a Raleigh, North Carolina, where I live, and we wrapped up a Raleigh chamber campaign last year. Raised about $7 million. That's all private sector investment. And that's not surprising, right? Because it's a big community. But we're in Henderson, Kentucky right now, raising about 1.5 to 2 million, somewhere in there. That's a community of 40,000. So if there's benefit, it can be in a big city, Raleigh. It can be a very small community like Henderson. It can be a mid-tier community like Springfield. If there's value there, in the banks and the utilities and the car dealers and the manufacturers and all these major companies see value in it, they will find the money to invest in your initiative, because they're going to benefit. They can see that an investment moves the needle, and then therefore can see a return on that investment.
Yeah. And I'm glad you're using the word investment, Rick. And Frank, we actually dropped the whole term member when we started this conversation. We went from, I told you, member dues, the traditional chamber model, making movement with, a bunch of $350 to $600 a year members is not going to significantly move the needle, because you can never provide enough value for those those members. So what we've tried to do with this campaign is almost go to a one ask, if you will, and we identified the top 25, top 30 potential investors and moved to an investor model that includes significant capital injection, and that included certainly a chamber membership or value perceived, but more than that, it was a seat around the table, depending on the level. And we have some investors now that are giving, anywhere between $25,000 and $50,000 a year to the organization, when in some cases they were never giving before. Because it's the investment approach.
So that's pretty interesting. Were you able to get some people that weren't even members, or with very small investors in the chamber before to pony up write a big old check?
Absolutely. And I would say the majority of our, well, I will tell you, the majority of our significant investors, I would say of 10,000 or more per year, the vast majority of them were very low-level members or investors in the past. And in some cases, they had never even been a member of the chamber. Because during the pandemic, we used that as an opportunity to engage them at a level we had never really been able to do as a chamber. This technology that we're using right now, whether it be Zoom or it be the platform you're using, it changed our ability to connect. And I believe strongly it made a huge difference.
Yeah, let's shift gears then to you started this before the pandemic.
Yes.
And then the pandemic hits. Mm-hmm. So the model had to change. Which of you want to kind of talk about, the cuss words you must have used? You had a plan and then you had a different world.
Yeah.
A lot of crap.
Rick, I'll let Rick start from the perspective of, they're the service provider in this case, and then I'll talk to you about kind of the conversation we really had.
Yeah. It's a great point. So to set the stage, right, everybody went through this countrywide shutdown. Q2 pretty much disappeared. It didn't matter if you're a fundraiser, a chamber of commerce, or a barber shop. Everybody shut down. And then the idea was we're all going to try to emerge in 30 to 60 days, which quite frankly, we saw more like 60 to 90 days. So at any given time, Frank, we're probably managing 25, maybe as many as 30 campaigns around the country. I think all but 2 shut down for the better part of 3 months. And not all of those have restarted. So you look at the economy in 2015 or so up to 2019, frankly, money was growing on trees. I could raise money for just about everything. And we were really out there raising a lot of money for a lot of interesting causes. The shutdown enabled a lot of people to say, is this mission critical? Is it mission critical not only to our organization, but to the community? Do we need to go forward? How critical is that going to be? And in some cases, they decided it's not mission critical. Now is not the time to go forward. That was certainly the minority. The majority, and quite frankly, nearly every chamber of commerce client and economic development client went forward under new parameters, a little bit of a pivot, because the organizations like Horton's and others all over the country, if you look at any given community, what is the one organization that is best suited to jumpstart that local economy? It's your local chamber of commerce. It's your local economic development organization. That is more mission critical than any in this type of economic environment that we're in right now, certainly back in Q2. So the first thing I imagine with Horton and his both his staff, his board, and community leaders is this mission critical? Are we going to go forward with this? And if we are, how are we going to pivot? Now, the pivoting itself, I can certainly talk about the use of technology, the use of reevaluations, but I almost feel like I'm getting ahead of it, because maybe Horton, you could talk about what those internal discussions were like, and then I could talk about as a company how we pivoted to then go forward.
Yeah.
Before you get into that, I just want to, for the people watching this, the old model, the proven model for 20, 30, 40 years, I don't know how long, Rick, is what? You're face to face. You're going to ask for money. It's face to face, right? Or at least phone call.
Absolutely.
Right?
Nobody's going to give you money over the phone. They're certainly not going to do it over Zoom. That's crazy. They would never do that. You have to be in the room with them. And then
So you must spend a lot of time in airplanes and on the road, and you're face to face with people asking for money, and that's how that model was built.
Exactly. I used to.
And then that was just cut off like a knife, right? All right, Horton, how did that feel?
Yeah, so in February of this year, or this past year, in middle of Q1, we were making some initial solicitations. So we probably, by that point, were close to 55, maybe 60%. So we were actually starting to make plans of really going after that tough 40% that we needed to move the needle with. And that was happening in early March. We were having the conversation. On March 16th, our governor shut down Ohio. And on March 17th, I'll never forget it, we held our first Zoom meeting as a chamber. We had never held a Zoom meeting before. And my CEO has just been an incredible leader in helping us as a staff kind of think through some of this stuff. And Mike was awesome about it. So we hosted a meeting with the county commissioner, our health commissioner, our CEO, and a county commissioner. So we had a city commission, county commission, the health commissioner, and Mike McDormand, our CEO, just to talk about the pandemic and what does the shutdown mean to Ohio. When we got done with that meeting on the 17th of March, so St. Patty's Day, we decided right there in a follow-up call, we're going to have to pause this campaign, but we have to really consider moving forward because we have a unique opportunity. As Churchill always said, never let a good crisis go to waste, and you don't want to, take advantage of the bad situation. But the real conversations with our campaign leadership and our executive board was we thought we had, and we knew we had a good program of work pre-pandemic. But we think we have an even more important program of work during the pandemic, and most important, post-pandemic, whenever that may be. We certainly didn't think it would last this long. We knew from an optics perspective, we needed to pause for everybody to get their legs under them to understand where things were maybe going. So it wasn't until early May that we made the official, relaunch. But we sent an email out to kind of our constituency base saying we were going to pause the campaign. We did that really at the end of that first week of the pandemic in Ohio, so the end of that week of March. And then we just started talking internally. And I'll never forget, God love him, Paul Santiago, one of the best program managers I've ever been around in my life, just a great person. He was leading our campaign. And I was talking to him, and he was at home in Jacksonville. And I said, dude, we're going to have to move forward with this campaign, but we're going to have to wait. He goes, yeah, I understand all of that. And I said, but we're going to do this whole thing by Zoom. He's like, what? What do you mean by Zoom? I said, man, I got to talk. I got to be face to face with people. I'll never forget the reaction. I said, Paul, I know it's going to be a challenge, but I got this. This is no problem. We'll just do our program of work via Zoom. We'll talk through it. And that's exactly what we did. And I can tell you he was uncomfortable with it. I think Convergent was a little uncomfortable with it, but they were super, super supportive. And the only thing that we did differently organizationally was we knew we went back to our office sooner than most because we have a smaller staff and we can space out. But we invested in some technology to make sure that our Zoom equipment was really good. So we upgraded our video capabilities. We upgraded our audio so that when we did the presentations, it would be of high quality. But I did come to this position, I think, with a little bit of fundraising background, having worked in our community foundation as a development guy just prior to coming here, 9 years ago. And I knew and I learned then that people give to people, but people really give to people with causes. And our cause is our community. And our community is our lane. And so when you started to talk about this program of work, it really began to resonate. And we were accessing then the C-suite in levels we were never as a chamber able to do. And we stopped talking about CVB or chamber or economic development. And we just talked about us as an organization collectively convening and executing a strategy together. And it has paid dividends, pardon the pun.
Let me ask you, Rick, I would think that, all right, you're a program manager or you as one of the principals, you'd come into a community, you'd have a list of the top, say, 60 people that you're going to try to get a meeting with, and it's a face-to-face meeting. These people are busy. and they don't like people taking up their time, and they have gatekeepers and all this kind of stuff. It can't be easy. And now you're having to switch to doing video calls. I mean, you must have thought that, well, this will never work. I'm not going to ever talk to anybody and actually close the deal here. I mean, what was your feeling going into it, and what's been the results?
We had a lot of concerns. To your point, Frank, so I jumped into the fundraising industry in summer of '96. So this summer, it's 25 years, quarter of a century I've been doing this. Everything is face-to-face. Paul Santiago, our campaign director that was working with Horton, he lives in Jacksonville, Florida, right? So every Monday morning he flies to Springfield. Every Friday afternoon he flies home. That's how you raise money, because it's a people relationship-based business. But that wasn't going to work. And even now with a lot of our communities, it's probably some on-site, some off-site. It really just depends on the community. And we always have to defer to the person we're trying to get in front of. So in any of our feasibility studies now, we want to see as many people as we can. And we typically can see up to about 70 or so folks. We can now see the better part of 90 over a 3-week period of time, because we're not doing the travel there. And so many people are so comfortable using Zoom and other video conferencing platforms like this, they don't even think twice about it. Most of our clients are getting better attendance at board meetings because you cut off the 15 or 20 minutes of travel each way, going back and forth to that particular meeting. So it's easy to always have a quorum. And quite frankly, to Horton's perspective there, we start getting really into the C-suite. When I'm interviewing somebody about Horton's program of work or another client's, and I'm trying to have a good, candid conversation, and these are confidential. I don't take Horton with me. He's their peer, and they're going to tell him exactly what he wants to hear. Oh, Horton, it's a great plan. Definitely go forward. You'll find out what they think when you ask them for a check. That's why we get hired, to do a feasibility study. But eventually we have to talk about money. So I want the president of the organization, the CEO, the plant manager at the manufacturing facility. We can't always get that person. We're getting them now. I walked into this thinking, I don't know how well this is going to work. They are more receptive. They are more likely to jump on a Zoom call than they are to meet us in person, especially a lot of these companies, much larger companies with local operations. They've changed. They've got corporate guidelines in terms of visitation policies, and we can't go on campus. And in those cases, this platform has worked so well, and it's much better than a phone call, because I can still pick up the nonverbals right here, which is half of it, just to see if they're truly engaged or if they're constantly down here, texting somebody. And that's made a world of difference. To Horton's point, we are seeing so much more engagement now than we were a year ago.
Horton, do you think this is like something that even when we can get back face to face, the whole fundraising model just might be, we can meet 10 people in the time we'd only meet with 1 or 2. They prefer it, and we close the deal. I mean, maybe this has been a huge blessing in this kind of way. What do you think?
Totally agree. And I think as frankly the boomers start to retire, it's going to even be more effective because the next generation of leaders is only used to using technology to communicate and to, in this case, raise money. So I think it's going to be a paradigm shift. There are still going to be, and I believe at the core, it's still important to have that face-to-face when you're making some of the very big asks. But at the end of the day, as I said before, people give to people, and people give to people with causes. So I think it was what we found. It was probably just as important for me to be, which I wouldn't have been on every call, but I was on like over 60 calls with investors, and we closed the vast majority of those at the level or above that they suggested. And I believe, just very humbly, that it's because there was a level of comfort knowing, well, Horton's passionate about this, and I'm watching him do this. It's the same result as if I was sitting across the literally the table from them. So I do think it's going to change things. I think it's going to change the Chamber of Commerce industry as a whole significantly. As I mentioned before, I think cell phones were really the beginning of the end for many chambers, because it robbed us of one of the biggest value props that we had, and that was to connect folks. And social media has changed that, the way we connect so differently. I think this web platform or digital platform where you're face to face and there's an accountability in your words, I think it does make a difference. And I do think that it's allowed us now to communicate our results more effectively. For instance, right at the beginning of the year, I sent an email out and then I followed up with an invitation to a Zoom call to bring investors around the virtual table to just give them a quick update on things. And we're going to be able to do that now in a very easy format. So you still have to get back to the basics. You still have to get back to the important things about relationships. And this business is a contact sport. Whether I'm physically contacting somebody by shaking a hand, as long as there's this verbal piece to it with a camera, I think you can still have that level of engagement. To Rick's point, if people come on and they don't turn their camera on, or you see them engaged in their phone and not on the screen, that's maybe a little bit different. But I have seen the level of engagement very, very high because people are there because they want to hear what's going on. They want to feel like they're engaged. And right now, people are hungry for that because you listen to whatever news source you're listening to and you're bombarded with all kinds of messages. This is a quick, easy way for a local chamber to communicate with its investors.
Great stuff. And you got a lot of quotes there that I think I'm going to pull out of this. So that's worth Horton. For those of you watching, I would just love to know, what are your thoughts on this? Is this potentially a game changer? The pandemic's awful, and what it's done to the small business community and so many others has been awful. But there's positives to every time there's a negative, every time there's a tragedy, there's opportunity. I think this is a really big deal on how we as chambers engage with the biggest investors or have our meetings. There are some chambers that they're still not doing any virtual whatsoever. They'll do maybe a Zoom webinar type of thing, but they're not really putting the members together with other members or having intimate kind of things. And they're certainly not asking for, how much money did you raise when this was all said and done? How much?
4.025, so almost $4.1 million. And I think we'll still get there. We have a couple still pending.
And Rick, do you think this is going to change your industry? And will you be able to serve more chambers now? Or maybe the friction to do this may be lessened because you won't be in an airplane 5 days a week?
I think so. In a great example, Frank, last Wednesday, I had an executive committee meeting with a client in Elmira, New York. This is a 3-time campaign client. We're just starting the feasibility study. I had to give the executive committee an update. That's at 8 a.m. At 9 a.m., I joined the Alamance County Chamber's annual investors meeting, which is in Burlington, North Carolina, about an hour west of me, and was able to give an update there on an investor satisfaction survey we're conducting. So I was able to talk with 2 clients that I could not be there physically in person. I could be in person with one, but not the other, certainly not 2. I could visit with both. And to Horton's point, in terms of the level of engagement, in Alamance County, they have 50 some odd investors in their campaign. They had 43 on this Zoom meeting. I've been to their annual investors meeting before, and they don't get 43 folks showing up here. So they're getting more people engaging and wanting to be involved and hearing a lot more. So I think it will change the industry, Frank. I think there's the ability to change certainly our model in terms of how we work with clients. We've always done full-time and half-time and quarter-time, depending on the level of involvement and engagement the client is looking for from us. And some of these clients that have got a lot of campaigns under their belt and fundraising experience, and the staff and the board and volunteers willing to roll up their sleeves and be a part of it, they don't need us there full-time. We can be there half-time or quarter-time. Others don't have the bandwidth and want us there full-time. With these models, I think we're going to see more of that sort of blending together. And a director like Paul will be able to work with multiple clients at once instead of just one particular client.
Very interesting. I really think this is a game changer for the industry. We're going to look back and say, wow, that shift to virtual that was forced upon us, that would have taken 5 years, 10 years, it took 9 months or even less. And now the world's changed.
Can I add something real quickly?
Sure.
getting back to the basics, about the importance of chambers and their role in convening groups and those kinds of things. I mean, again, that's one of the most historic values of a chamber. That all really played out in this. And I guess my message to my peers that may be listening to this is, if you waited on the pandemic to try to develop and forge those relationships in your community, some are going to say, well, you waited too long and you missed an opportunity. And I would say use this as an opportunity to learn from. But it served us exceptionally well, because prior to the pandemic, for the last 5-6 years, going on a decade, frankly, we were really convening our peers, our partners in the community around common issues. And when this pandemic hit, while some communities were trying to develop relationships around a table to figure out how to respond, that work was already done in our community. So everyone got behind this program of work. Everyone, all of our partners doubled down on their commitments, literally and figuratively. And it has served us exceptionally well and will move us to that next level, I hope, as a community. And that is, I think, the message. There's still value in doing the traditional things that we do well as chambers, and that's convening the conversation, the important conversations in our community. But you have to find ways to amplify your voice, and I cannot think of a better way to do that than to embrace this kind of technology to do it. It is the thing that will separate you among all the noise if you're bringing value and you do it with a genuineness. And that is what we've learned in this whole process. Is we had a strong story, we had a compelling program of work, but more important, we had engaged partners that made a commitment to be even more engaged moving forward. That's why we've been successful. We had great campaign leadership. I mean, tremendous. We had great active staff and volunteer involvement. But more than that, we had a business community that finally saw something they could get behind that was focused on something sustainable and long-term. That's the value that chambers of commerce bring, whether it's an economic development program of work or it's a member value statement that you're promulgating. If you say it with authenticity and with commitment, this format works exceptionally well to raise money and to raise influence.
I only got you guys for a couple more minutes here, but Rick, I'm wondering if for the chambers that are watching this that are thinking, oh, yeah, it worked for them, but it won't work for us. How can they kind of see if maybe it will work for them? Any words of wisdom here?
Yeah, it's a great question, Frank, because I think chambers in smaller communities are quick to discount this strategy, that it probably won't work for them. There are any number of Raleigh chambers out there, 1.1 million population, or Clark County, Ohio, with the better part of 150, 160,000 people population. But look at a Burlington, Iowa, with 40,000 people, or Henderson, Kentucky, with about 35,000 people. We are seeing it happen in communities large and small. At the end of the day, if you have a value proposition that resonates with investors, where you can address very specific community needs and opportunities, they will get behind this, especially if you have a track record like Horton has. I like to tell my clients, I'm only as good as the product I'm selling, and I'm selling something. I'm selling Horton and his body of work, and you couple that with an initiative, a 5-year program of work that's going to move the needle in Springfield. I can sell that. And when you've got a good program of work and you've got that track record as a chamber, don't worry about your community size and whether you can raise $100,000 a year or $200,000 a year or $300,000 per year over some 3 to 5 year period of time. There's funding out there if you have a compelling vision.
Interesting stuff. I need to wrap this up. Horton, if people want to contact you directly, are you willing to take a phone call or emails? How would you like to be contacted?
Absolutely. Yeah, email is a great place to start, and then I'll share my my phone number. But I'll give you my office direct number right here. It's 937-521-1935. That's direct to me, and yeah, I'm happy to share any of our war stories, if you will. And what I love about this industry is that we all it's co-opetition a lot of times. We all compete, I guess, in geographic areas, but at the end of the day, this profession is so great about sharing, and whatever I can do to help my colleagues, I'm certainly willing to do that, and will do so.
Very good. And Rick, how do people get in touch with you if they want to explore doing this?
The email address works really well. My phone number, 919-270-2137. And we can put our email in the comments section. What do you recommend there, Frank?
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually a few questions in the comments, so maybe you guys can check those out, answer the questions when you get a minute, and then also put your contact information in there, so people can reach out to you. I think it's a huge opportunity for chambers to do big things, and when you do big things, it excites people, and it excites a whole different group of people than care about a lot of the stuff you've been doing. And so just opportunity, huge opportunity. Thank you guys so much for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having us. Good seeing you. Continue, Horton.
Thank you all those that are watching. You guys take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.